Hey guys, it's Jake here with eTrailer. Today we have a 2019 Grand Design Reflection, and we're going to be taking a look at, and I'm going to show you how to install the etrailer.com self-adjusting drum brakes. Now what you're going to see right here on the surface is the drum itself. That is not the kit that we're talking about today. That is also available on our website, and chances are if you're replacing your brakes, there's a good chance you're going to have to replace your drums too. If it's just the pads, then you should be okay just to swap out the brakes. But if you're having problems like the owner of our vehicle here was having, is that they said that their brakes felt really wishy-washy and that it wasn't stopping the RV as well as they thought it could be, or as well as when they bought it new. And it turns out that their magnets and their brake drums were scored on the inside, which is not good. So we ended up swapping them out with new brake drums, the new brake pads. As opposed to traditional style drum brakes, these are going to be self-adjusting. So instead of the little cog on the back side looking like a gear to be able to adjust your brakes, this is going to look more so like a traditional saw blade, like a wood saw blade. And when you apply the brakes and the brakes are opening and closing as you're driving down the road, it's going to take a little tab, a spring-loaded tab, and spin that cog for you so that that little saw blade looking thing, it's going to spin and it's going to automatically adjust your brakes as you're using them. So 3 years down the road, your brakes are going to be adjusted just from applying them. Now when you first install these, you're going to want to hear a little bit of dragging in the drum. So you can hear the brakes dragging on the inside of the drum just a little bit. That's what you want. You don't want to not be able to hear it at all. If you can't hear it at all, that means you need to pop one of these two caps off, and you'll be able to see it pretty soon which one it's going to be, because you'll see that saw blade on the inside. You'll just take a screwdriver and just pop that saw blade a couple of times until you get a little bit of resistance. Now something I would recommend if you have the traditional style drum brakes is to pick up a brake spoon, which is designed to actually help to adjust the brakes. I wouldn't say to worry about that with these, because once you get those adjusted, that first time you shouldn't have to adjust them anymore. But if you want to pick one up just to have one in your toolbox, it's definitely not a bad thing. Now these are going to come in a kit of 2. We highly recommend replacing them in pairs. So when you think of a single axle, you want to replace both sides at the same time. So if you see, once you take your brake drums off, you see that one side looks fine and the other side doesn't, I would go ahead and replace both at the same time so that they're applying the same amount of brakes, and you know that when you change them, you change both of them. Now that doesn't go to say that you look at the front axle and the front axle looks fine but the back one's not. You don't have to replace all of them at the same time. I probably would, but if you're trying to save a little bit of money, you could just do the area of concern and then leave the other one as is. The one thing I would think about though is you might look into why that one axle is burning up the brakes and the other one's not. You may have more weight loaded to one side of the camper or the other, and that's putting more stress on a certain drum or the other. You may have a split wire it's just not applying the brakes on one side altogether. So those are some of the things that you want to look into if you see something weird like that. You should be getting even pressure from braking from all 4 of them. Now the one thing I will add before we jump into the installation is that when you get new brake pads, if you're getting new brake pads because the magnet is scored, you definitely want to replace the drums with them. And then anytime you're breaking in new brake pads, there's a series, you can look it up on our website. It'll show you the different steps that you have to take, and kind of a hint at what the process is it's like you have to go 50 miles an hour and then stop down to 20 miles an hour and do a hard stop to 20. You have to do that like 15 times in order to properly break in your brake pads. That is a big problem when it comes to trailer brakes and vehicle brakes. People don't know that on your vehicle, that's what you're supposed to do. You have to break them in so that you can heat the pad up enough so it takes the same shape as the drum or as the disc brakes on your vehicle. You have to heat those up so that you can burn off some of that factory, the protectant on the inside, and that the brake pads are ready to go when you go on a trip. You can't just take new brake pads out and just ride them like normal, because what will happen is it'll put a smooth, glassy finish on that brake pad, and that's not going to give you very good braking. It's also going to cause them to squeak a lot. So make sure that you break in the brake pads properly before you take off on your first trip. But now that we've gone over some of those features, let's go ahead and jump into the install. To begin our installation, we're going to take our wheels and tires off of our camper so that we can get to the brakes. At this point, if you have tire sensors on your wheels and tires, you want to keep track of which is the front and which is the back, because you want to put those back in the same spot, or else it'll give you false readings for whichever place your tires are in. I will just take our wheel and tire, pull it off, set it out of the way. Now we'll take a flathead screwdriver. You want to have a pretty thin tip on the edge, or a pretty fine edge, and we'll just tap it in behind this cap until you see the screwdriver slide behind it like that, and then you just have to rotate it, prying around it till the cap comes off. Now we'll take that same flathead screwdriver, put it behind your castle nut cap there, pry it off. Your axles may have a pin. If it's a cotter pin style with the pin going through, just straighten that out and pull it out. Now when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, because everything in here is going to be greasy or dirty, it's not a bad idea, since this has to go back on, to set it on top of a piece of cardboard just to keep everything clean. Now we'll take our hub, pull out. When you pull out, there's going to be a washer that we need to save and your outer bearing. There's the washer. And our bearing is right behind it. We'll take our hub, pop it out, set it on the ground. Now when you get to this point, with drum brakes, it's not a guarantee that it's always going to be the pad. There's three things that you want to check. The first thing being the pads themselves, which in our case, the pads look pretty good. They're about the same thickness as our new pads that we're getting ready to put on. The other things that you want to check are going to be the magnet itself, because this is what's going to apply the brakes. So you want to feel the face of the magnet. If it does not feel like glass, then it probably needs to be replaced. Something got in this drum that is causing scoring to happen on this, and sometimes that's as little as a really, really inexpensive set of brake pads that have a lot of dust, and that dust can get trapped in here and then cause scoring. So you want to feel the magnet. We can feel scoring on there, or grooves, and then you want to feel the face of where the magnet is dragging, and there's a lot of scoring on this brake drum. So with this setup, we're going to have to replace the brake pads and the brake drums to be able to get that fresh, new, clean start so we have good brake power. Now we're going to take a 14mm socket and remove the 5 nuts that are holding our brake assembly in place. And we can take our brake assembly, we'll pull it off. You're going to have a couple wires attached here. All I'm going to do is cut this clip that they're held on by. And then wherever they're connected, you can see here, this is our factory wire that goes into our axle. Let's take that, cut that off. Now we're going to take our brake assembly and put it back, or put it onto our studs. And you'll know which one is the correct one. You'll get 2 left side ones, 2 right side ones. The easiest way to tell is to just match it up with the brakes that you're taking off, so you make sure the magnet's in the same orientation, that it will rotate towards the front of the vehicle. Put the nuts back on and tighten them down. You want to tighten these down in a star pattern just like you would with your wheels. Then you want to come back with a torque wrench and torque all this hardware down to the specifications per the manufacturer for whatever axle you have. Now we need to connect up our wiring. So we're going to strip back our wires. Looks like we have a double jacketing here. And these wires do not matter which one they're connected to on the brake cylinder. We are using heat shrink butt connectors in order to ensure a nice clean connection. for the years to come. Now we'll want to take a rag, clean all the old grease off, especially because we're going to be switching over to a set of pre-packed brake drums, and they're packed with it's like a high temp marine grease. So it's a different type of grease, so you want to get all that old stuff out. We're going to take our grease gun, pump it in here a few times, get that red grease out of that slot here, and we can get some new marine grease on here. Now before we lift our new brake drum up into place, we'll want to take some grease, and you just want to match whatever grease is in your bearings. So we've got marine grease in there, so we're going to use marine grease on our spindle here. We'll just put a little bit on the spindle so that we don't have any dry spots on it. Wipe that on. And you definitely want to get yourself some gloves when you're doing this, because it can get real messy, and some of this grease is actually not good to get on your skin. Now we can take our brake drum, slide it over our spindle. We'll pop this cap off. And these pre-packed drums are really nice because they come with a lot of grease in them, so you don't need a whole lot to pump in there after we're done. Make sure your bearing slides over. Take our washer, put it back in place, and follow that with our nut. Now we're going to take an 1.5 inch socket, slide it over our axle nut, and you want to torque this down. We usually like to do about 50 pounds, and what that's going to do is that's going to ensure that our brake drum is seated properly all the way back, and then we'll back the nut off. So now that we've got it torqued down to 50, we're just going to break this loose. And we'll thread it back on until it's hand tight. We'll give the drum a few spins. See that it's still spinning with little resistance, but you can hear the brakes dragging on the inside. That's good. One right there. And we'll take our tension ring and clip it back on. Then you want to take a grease gun, and we're going to fill grease until we start seeing it squirt out of this outer bearing. There we go, just like that. Now we can take our cap, put it back into place. Once we get that all put back together, we can go ahead and repeat that process for however many brake assemblies that you're doing. Well guys, once you get everything put back together, you can put your wheels and tires back on your camper and you're ready to hit the road. Hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not the etrailer drum brakes are going to be right for you and your 2019 Grand Design Reflection.